Talk therapy seems to be a default go-to for processing trauma, but it's not the only way. There are so many tools and therapies out there that can help us along our journey in processing trauma, but one of the biggest challenges is figuring out what exactly works best for you. After reaching out to Facebook, LinkedIn, and a few other social media platforms regarding the next episode of Veteran Art Studio, I was a bit surprised, mostly because I was thinking I was going to do an episode on how to draw a portrait, basic human anatomy, how to draw a realistic eye, and it turned out to be writing. Writing was the most popular request for the next video, and I'm kind of happy it went out. Before I go into why that is, here's what we're going to cover today, and I'll have each section time-stamped in the comment section below. 1. Intro to expressive writing. 2. Expressive writing exercise in 7 steps. 3. How writing saved my life. 4. A recap of the 7 points plus a cheat sheet. And 5. Additional resources for expressive writing. Anyone who's maintained a diary or a journal can speak on how it's just a great tool to have around you to speak out your innermost thoughts, desires, fears, and so on without any sense of judgment. And it's always worth the amount of time that you put into it. But what I didn't realize is that this was expressive writing, and it was a tool that I was using all these years. It's something that I've used unknowingly that turned out to be 2 of my books, and it's something that I continue to use today to continue to express myself, to have a safe place to go where I can just say what I want without any judgment. In the book, The Body Keeps the Score, brain scans of people dealing with trauma reveal that recalling traumatic memories affects the left frontal lobe, or Broca's area. Speech specifically powers down. During recall of traumatic memories and flashbacks, this area would essentially experience similar symptoms of impairment as one would experience during a stroke. On the other side of flashbacks, the brain's right hemisphere is overloaded with activity, fight or flight response, and the cognitive function just shuts down. In short, reliving trauma shuts down people's ability to express themselves and what they're experiencing. If you found yourself at a loss for words in recalling traumatic events, you're not alone, and that's why. On the same token, another region of the brain called Brodmann's area lights up during traumatic memory recall. This is a region in our visual cortex that registers images when they first enter the brain. While traumatic flashbacks deactivate the brain's left hemisphere, responsible for verbal reasoning and logic, and lights up the right hemisphere, which is responsible for memories of sound, touch, smell, and the emotions they evoke, Brodmann's area bypasses the executive functions of the brain, making them feel like instinctive truth. No matter how much one can learn about trauma, one thing seems quite clear. The rational brain is basically powerless to speak, while the emotional brain is on overdrive. When our emotional and rational brains are in conflict, for example, when we're betrayed by someone we love or terrified by someone we trust, a brain-based battle ensues. But this war is waged inside of our bodies, through our nervous system and our digestive system, as well as the rest of our body, instead of being externalized or processed outside of us. This is where having external tools such as access to therapy, creative expression, and in this case, writing, can come in handy in drawing out those destructive forces inside of us to be processed externally. Writing about painful memories and traumatic experiences appears to have physical and mental health benefits on several levels, and it's worth giving expressive writing a try to see if it can be beneficial to you as well. In another study through the University of Texas Austin professor psychologist James W. Pennebaker, the benefits of mental health and overall wellness were explored, revealing how expressive writing can have both immediate and long-term positive effects. In this study, participants wrote down negative emotions for 15 minutes each day for 4 consecutive days. What the study discovered is that expressive writing relieved emotions and boosted immunity, with positive effects lasting for months. It became more apparent that writing about traumatic experiences can have a significant effect on your psychological and physiological health. Confronting traumatic experiences can feel painful during the process and even for a while after. But when these thoughts were externalized, the physical and psychological benefits increased. In turn, when we allow ourselves space to process pain as opposed to holding it all inside, we allow these memories the chance to live outside of us and have less control over our daily life experiences. Whether it's a writing workshop or encouragement from a therapist, writing exercises outside of a clinical setting has benefits worth exploring. Our prior experiences, including the most traumatic and painful events, remain in our subconscious programming as a means of keeping us safe. But if we're not mindful of how much we allow trauma to take the wheel, we can find ourselves and our lives being run on the fumes of trauma, which is exhausting and taxing on the mind and body. In another course that I've produced called Mind Train, I go over something called the RAS, or Reticular Activating System. Now, your RAS is your brain's filtration system, and it screens out all the information that's coming your way from a variety of your senses. There's no way that you can take all that information in at one time, all the time. So your RAS pretty much pre-screens everything that's coming into your conscious mind. And a lot of your subconscious fears, trauma, everything else that's just kind of bubbling beneath the surface is just waiting right there. And that can color your life experience, including your reticular activating system. So if you don't have control of your brain's basic screening tool, then you're going to have a lot of issues. But this is where expressive writing comes in. Expressive writing seeks to bring so much of that to the surface, the things that you don't talk about, the things that you're not willing to share so easily. And once you've got control of that, once you have those memories put on paper, they seem tangible, they seem detached from you, or they can seem detached from you. And you own those memories instead of those memories owning you. How to start the daily expressive writing exercise. Step 1, find a consistent space where you can write with minimal to no interruptions. Set this up in a ritual format if you'd like. Make it special to you. Step 2, be honest with yourself. You don't have to share this writing with anyone. You can choose to do so after, but that's not the aim. When you write for yourself, you can be completely honest. Remember, expressive writing is for you. You're not looking for shock, validation, or any other socially dependent response. Step 3, sit down and begin writing. Write about a traumatic event that is a recurrent thought in your daily life, or even something mundane. Whatever happens to be on your mind, allow yourself to write about it for just 15 minutes. If you'd like to do more, do more. If 15 minutes is more than enough, then leave it at that. Step 4. If you're experiencing recurrent thoughts, ask yourself why this keeps coming up. Bear in mind that it's okay to feel things when you're writing. It's an important part of this process. It's to feel things in real time, not to numb things out or repress. Writing about upsetting experiences has the potential to bring a lot of different emotions to the surface. Anger, sadness, remorse, confusion. This is normal, and it's normal to feel these things during and after this writing exercise. Give yourself permission and space to feel and process these emotions. Step 5. If you speak other languages, feel free to explore expressive writing in your native language or another language you speak well enough to express yourself. Don't worry about spelling or grammar. The real power of expressive writing lies in taking control of your trauma rather than allowing the trauma to control you. Step 6. Feel free to draw or doodle around your writing if you feel stuck. Sometimes when we switch mediums of expression, they can actually help us focus, or at least take the anxiety out of the process. Step 7. Ask yourself a neutral question to break from the fog. For example, if you could be anywhere in the world right now, let's say without the current pandemic issues, where would you be and why? What's your favorite flavor of ice cream? If you could take 3 items to a deserted island for a year, what would you take? It's important to put a little distance between yourself and the trauma. So if you need additional ideas on neutral fog-breaking questions, see the blog link in the description below. Expressive writing is one of many tools you can use to process painful memories and/or stress. Also, remember to keep your writing gear in a meaningful place where you'll remember it. Putting emotional experiences into words and writing helps to slow down the rapid fire of the emotional brain. As per the previous studies mentioned, expressive writing can help improve sleep hygiene, which impacts depression and immune function. Writing about thoughts and feelings, whether it's about trauma or a mundane event, grounds us in the present. In my course Mind Train, I go over how the subconscious mind can control the conscious mind unless we directly deal with our own programming. If you find that this writing exercise doesn't help you process or you're not feeling it, feel free to try something else. Writing is just one of many tools that can be therapeutic, and on the journey of processing trauma, figuring out what feels best for you can only be discovered by you. I continued to write down all these different events, things that were really bothering me, all these different painful emotions that were festering inside of me. And it wasn't until that I got to a point where I was sitting at a college, or not sitting at a college, but I was actually giving a speech at a college about women in combat. And I was retelling a story of when I found out 5 of the Marines that I used to work with passed away in one day. And when I was telling the story, I was just crying, and it was horrible because at the same time I was dealing with the trauma, but now I was super embarrassed because now I was crying. And because there's so much stigma around women in the military still, how we're basically dealing with being accepted as human still, that we're not really seen as, I guess we're not seen as people. So knowing that I wasn't really accepted by the country that I almost died for, that was pretty fucked up. So when I was telling this story, I was just so embarrassed and tearing up, and people of course came up to me after, and this was like a all-women's college in central Massachusetts. So they were so nice about it, but I was just so mortified because I'm like, I don't want to cry, because, you know, God forbid I show any real emotion about all the horrific trauma that I went through, but some dude could cry about it and people would be like, oh, God bless our troops, you know, that's great, and, you know, get it out of your heart, and just feel really good about it. And it's stoic, it's heroic, and it looks like something familiar to them. But if a woman goes through it, you can't show fucking emotion. You can't show shit. And you can ask anybody who I served with, who especially served on Team Lioness, talking about the horrific shit that we went through is really tough. And it's not because that we don't want to talk about it. It's because that we're getting judged for it constantly and nobody wants to listen. Or it feels like at times nobody wants to listen. There are people who do want to listen. So I've noticed that when I was getting out those feelings, those memories, for example, the 5 Marines that I worked with who passed away at one time, the more I elaborated on it, and it didn't take just one time, it was maybe 5 drafts of writing this story out until it felt good to me, until it felt like it said everything that I needed to say. And it wasn't necessarily that I was writing it for somebody to look at, judge, and say, oh, this is worth publishing. It was really just about, does this make sense to me? Does this story tell everything that I need to tell? And when I got to that point, it didn't hurt me as much anymore. It didn't feel as cumbersome anymore. And the more I did this with other memories, the other memories that bothered me, other memories that were just plaguing me throughout the day. I mean, I still think of shit that I did when I was 7. So forget Iraq. Iraq is just a whole other, bowl of noodles there. But I noticed the more I did this, the more I brought out all these things that I was upset about, all these things that I couldn't change, it felt better. It was just like I was taking one more thing out of my psychological rucksack. and it felt great. And after that, I did publish a few books, albeit self-published. So I self-published a few books. I was in a book that was published in Routledge for any of the other bitchy ass veteran authors who are like, oh, you didn't get published by a mainstream publisher, wait your turn. Because that shit happens too. It felt amazing. It felt amazing to have my story out there. It didn't matter if it won any awards. It didn't matter if it was selling hundreds of copies. It just mattered that that trauma existed outside of me. And that is really what did it for me. And when I stumbled upon expressive writing and the process and the research that went behind it, I was just all on board for absorbing any literature I could about it, downloading any books I could about it, and just reading or watching what I could on the topic. And I've included some of those links in the description box below and also in the link in my blog. But yeah, it was really tough for a long time for me, and I don't recommend anybody having to go through this experience like I did. If you have a way to get help, please get help. But for the first decade I was home, I was pretty much pushed away. I wasn't taken seriously. It felt like all the horrific shit that I went through didn't matter, even though somebody who was a dude who wasn't even in combat would be hailed as a hero. And I know there are a lot of different issues with that in the veteran community about how people feel about their service. And I'm not here to dock anybody's service or, engage in a pissing contest about it. It's really just about giving people space to breathe and just tell their story. I don't care if you were a quartermaster who sat in Fort Jackson for 5 years, or were in the Air Force and organized medical records for 3 and got out. It doesn't matter. The problem here is when we're doing, whether it's expressive writing or any other therapeutic tool, is that every single individual facing some sort of trauma, no matter what it is, needs space to express. As a recap to the daily expressive writing exercise, step 1 is find a consistent space to write. 2, be honest with yourself. 3, sit down and just get to writing for 15 minutes. 4, if you're experiencing recurrent thoughts, explore why it keeps coming up. 5, feel free to use other languages and don't worry about spelling or grammar. 6, feel free to draw or doodle if you feel like it. And 7, ask yourself a neutral, fog-breaking question. In the description box below, I've included the link to my blog where you can find the cheat sheet if that helps, or you can go back and choose the timestamps for this video to follow along. In the description box, I've listed a link to a few books and sites on expressive writing, and if you know of any others that I should include, feel free to mention it in a comment below. Before we close, I just wanted to share with you that you already possess the wisdom to know what's best for you. When we're busy juggling daily living along with trauma, we can feel somewhat out of control in our lives. Feeling out of control is often an indication that we're not exercising our power to create the lives we desire. Rather than giving our power to trauma or to other people, we can choose to turn within and reflect on the choices and resources we have accessible. On the flip side, if you are familiar with my writing, specifically The Desert Warrior, you'll find that I had gone through a litany of positive and negative coping mechanisms, but in the end, it really turned out to be a journey that was multifaceted. So I don't sit here and claim that expressive writing is going to be the magic pill for you. Nothing is, not even actual pills. What works for you will be a variety of things, at least from what I've seen. If one thing works for a person, then more power to them. But in my experience, I've seen maybe like 3 or 4 things that are just somebody's magical pill. And It also takes a strong support network, which is something else I mentioned in my story, and that nobody is an island. And that's something that's really important to highlight here, that even though when you're writing these exercises on your own for 15 minutes a day, 4 days a week, that it does feel lonely. It can feel lonely. And I definitely know that feeling. But there's something really beautiful about giving a gift to yourself of your own answers. There's something really wild about it that feels very natural, very organic, and some of the most helpful information. Some of the most helpful information that you'll get on your journey comes from within. People that you'll meet, whether it's therapists, whether it's helpful friends, whether it's family, good or bad, are all signposts on the same highway to healing on your journey, and that nobody can give you those answers. Nobody. You have those answers, and part of your journey is doing the work and figuring it out. And I really believe that's worth everybody's while. When we have the space to process pain, when we can see our lives through an objective lens, we can make better decisions. We can create a life with more meaningful experiences. Our sense of empowerment returns. We no longer feel out of control or intimidated by external factors or insecurities. If you'd like to share what you're writing about, you're more than welcome to do so without any judgment. I know I seem like an asshole sometimes, but I'm not going to judge you. If you're going to do the work and delve into this writing, then I commend you. And yeah, that's all you need, basically. But in the meantime, I do wish you all the best. Thank you for tuning in to this episode on expressive writing. It's something that is very near and dear to my heart. And just know that you're deserving of joy. You deserve to be happy. And if you have things that are weighing on your mind that are taking their time and leaving, then if it's not this tool, I hope something else helps. But I can say that expressive writing, in addition to all the other artistic mediums I'm involved in, have helped. All of those things have helped. And in addition to having a helpful support network. I hope it does lead to a more meaningful life for you. But in the end, that journey is really up to you, what you want to take from it, and the work you put into it. So with that, I will say thank you for stopping by Better in Art Studio. Take care, and I will see you here next time.